Hello, listeners. Welcome to the Third Degree Masonic Podcast. I'm your host, Samuel, and today I'd like to remember and memorialize a man whose time on this earth changed my life and the lives of countless others, and whose passing created a void in the hearts of many. Let me tell you about Brother Niefer. Brother Samuel M. J. Niefer was born December 27th, 1997, to John and Vicky. He had several siblings, including Jenna, Michael, Nathan, and Sarah. He was a graduate of Penna Career Center as an automotive technician and a proud Genoa resident. In his high school years, he was active in many activities, including wrestling and football. He was initiated into the Order of Malay for Ottawa chapter on January 24th, 2010, when he was only 13 years old. He was a very enthusiastic member, and he was responsible for bringing several of his friends into the fraternity and causing a growth spike in the order. He even became master counselor of his chapter, the equivalent of the president of the chapter. He was initiated, passed, and raised as a Master Mason at Genoa Lodge number 433, Free and Accepted Masons of Ohio, as a Lewis in 2017. His father was so proud to raise him into our fraternity. He went to work almost immediately, serving the lodge as junior and then senior steward from 2017 until 2019. He served the lodge with optimism and hard work, always willing to lend a hand to those in need, and oftentimes going above and beyond what was asked or required of him. In 2018, he was chosen to receive the highest active service award the Order of Malay can bestow upon a member, the Chevalier. He was knighted later that year. Sam worked for the city of Toledo as an automotive mechanic, and he loved his job. He was happy to be able to work with his Masonic brother and mentor, Jay. Countless stories of absolute chaos and shenanigans he would tell us about what happened in the shop on a daily basis would have you belly laughing for hours. He was often quoted saying, "Well, how the heck did you manage to break it that bad?" In his free time, he was an avid motorcyclist, carpenter, and a competitive axe-throwing champion. He often spent any other free time designing his future barn-dominium. Sam was one of the most unique individuals I have ever met. He was always quick with a joke, and his sarcasm was always poignant. His smile and laugh were infectious, and you couldn't help but laugh along with him. He was loyal, brave, and stubborn to a fault, often taking days or weeks to convince him that his idea was crazy or outlandish. He would agree with you eventually, but not before doing his best to convince you that you were the crazy one. He was always there to help his friends and brothers. He always announced his presence from the moment he walked in the door, and you were always genuinely happy to hear and see that he had arrived. You know it was going to be a good time when he showed up to the party. He was a free spirit, and when I would ask him where he wanted to go on our numerous motorcycle rides, he would say, "Let's just see where the road takes us." He was taken from this world suddenly on March 9th, 2020, in an accident in his home workshop. Listeners, now that you know a little bit about Brother Niefer, I would like to tell you a story about what happened after, a story of heartbreak, of family, and of unity. I remember that day just like it was yesterday. I woke up late on that day and received multiple text messages from some of my Masonic brothers, Jack, Dustin, and Ricky, asking me to meet them for an early dinner. Upon meeting them at the local establishment, we sat down for dinner and a couple of beers and enjoyed each other's company and discussions on what we were going to do later that night. It was after we ordered that I received a text message from a high school classmate who told me that EMS was at the Niefer house and that I should get over there. We all got up from the table, canceled our food, and paid our tabs, and began to walk the 3 blocks from the restaurant to the house. We just kept thinking that Sam's mom or dad were having more health complications and that we would be there to help him and his sister with whatever they needed and be good brothers. When we arrived, we were informed of just how wrong we really were. We were met by Sam's neighbor and childhood friend Jess, who through bloodshot eyes and sobs told us it was Sam, and that she did not know where they took him, but that there was an accident. A passerby gave us a ride back to my apartment in the back of his pickup truck. We all piled into my car and went to all of the local hospitals, finally ending up at the very place that I work. The confusion on the receptionist's face in the emergency room was obvious, considering that she had never seen me out of scrubs. But that confusion quickly disappeared when I asked for my friend. My good friend and coworker, Nurse Amber, came out, and before words could leave her mouth, I knew that we were too late. I could see it on her face, the look I had seen hundreds of times from doctors and nurses. But this time, it was even worse from friend to friend. The look of, I'm sorry, but your loved one is gone. No words needed to be said. I knew. All she could say was, I'm sorry, buddy, and gave me one of the most heartbreaking hugs of my life. Ricky got a text from Sam's sister, breaking the bad news. All he could say to me was, he's gone, before he slumped down into a chair with his hands on his face. We were shocked. How could this happen? Why? It just didn't seem real, more like a nightmare. But reality quickly set in when they took us back to him. Trauma Room 7. We walked into a dark room, one so familiar to me from my work, but one that would never be the same after that moment. The room was filled with people. His best friends, Dakota and Mike, his father, his mother, sister, and now us. His mother sat by his bedside, holding his hand. When she saw us, she stood and walked over to us. I had no words, but she did not need them. She hugged us and brought me by hand to his bedside and sat me in her chair. She said some words that, to this day, in my head sounded like, he needs you, he needs his brothers. I sat there, holding his hand amongst his closest friends, and tried to come to terms with the situation. He looked at peace laying there, that I could almost convince myself that he was just sleeping, that any moment he would jump up and say, gotcha. At some time, I had to get up. I could feel the breakdown coming. As I left the room and walked down familiar hallways, I was met with the gazes of my coworkers, who had no words, only pity in their eyes. I left the building and sat out in front of the hospital on a concrete bench, and I could no longer hold it together. I screamed, I cried, and I pleaded to God and asked him why. When I thought all hope was lost and that my pleading would get no answers, I felt an arm around my shoulders. As I looked over, I realized that it was Sam's dad. I never even heard him sit down. He pulled me in close and comforted me even in his own grief. There were no words that could have been said, just 2 brothers grieving together on that cold, snowy night. We went to work immediately upon request from his family, calling and informing his friends and brothers who did not know. It was not something that should be found out about on social media. It should come from family. One by one, they arrived for us to give them the news, and one by one, I had to watch the light leave their eyes and their hearts break over and over again. Soon, a group of 15 were there in the waiting room, taking turns to say their goodbyes. We left together, and Dustin and I hosted everyone back at our apartment. I knew everyone was hurting, and I knew alcohol would be used to numb the pain. No one needed to be alone that night. We sat up until the twilight hours, telling stories and passing bottles of whiskey around and drinking straight from the bottle. Eventually numb, and not only physically but mentally and spiritually exhausted, we went to bed. People slept wherever there was space. Not a couch or bed was empty that night. The next few days passed by like a blur and felt like a dream. There was so much work to be done. We needed to find his apron, his Chevalier cords, and plan his Masonic funeral. None of us were officers yet, but we asked the lodge for the privilege of performing his last rites as a Mason, and they were happy to let us. I think they knew what it meant to us. Every day, we would wake up for lunch at Ray's Cafe in Genoa and try to eat something. The establishment is owned by one of our lodge brothers, and we were regulars to the servers and the staff. Every meal, we were told, was covered by the owner and the staff, and that they were very sorry for our loss. As the days went on, more and more old friends and brothers who were lost contact over the years just started showing up at our apartment, saying that they felt the call to be with us, and that they did not know where we lived exactly, but they knew that they would find us. More than once, someone would look out a window and say, "Here comes another one," and see one of our brothers aimlessly wandering up and down the street looking for the entrance to our apartment. And we would send someone down to fetch them. At one point, our apartment made for two was filled to the brim with over 40 people, grieving, laughing, and telling stories. Girlfriends and wives made countless trips to the store for food and drinks to keep everyone comfortable. The amount of love in that room can never be measured, but to me, it felt like the warmth of the sun. For the first time in my life, I knew with irrefutable truth that I was not alone and that we were together. We worked late into the night practicing the funeral rites. We all knew our part. When the day came, we all arrived, together like a family. We helped his mom with the final preparations before everyone showed up. I remember he looked so professional in his blue jacket and khaki pants, like a true D-Malay. I had to reach into his coffin and fix his Chevalier medallion. The mortician had not gotten it quite right. I remember that it made his mom laugh, and that it was good to see her smile, even if just for a moment. People came in all morning and all day to pay their respects. Friends, coworkers, and neighbors all coming out to pay their respects. When the time came, the room was filled with people and Masons from lodges all over. We performed his final rites to the best of our ability. Ricky and I shared the worshipful master part, and when one of us would falter, the other would take over. The prayer was given by Jack, a hard-working laborer who spends his days working in the earth and trees, who sounded as though he himself was begging God for the prayer to come true. I sang the hymn, a song I never want to sing again. David, a tall and large man of great pride, held Sam's apron high and proud for the entire ceremony as tears poured from his face. I would like to think Sam would be proud of us, that his final rites were performed by family. That night, one more ceremony was performed in private, on a farm in the country. Friends and family gathered in the cold as we built a large bonfire and burned one of his work shirts. And toasts were made in his honor. The sound of burnouts and trucks revving up and down Wrecker Road could be heard for miles, and the flames from the fire could be seen from the turnpike. It was a beautiful night. The following weeks were strange, as we all tried to go back to our normal lives, work, family, responsibilities, but we did our best to make sure that no one felt alone and promised each other that we would not let anyone grieve alone. Little did we know that soon after, the government would lock everything down for weeks due to COVID. It was one of the most lonely times in my life as a healthcare worker. I was dealing with things I could never dream of at work, and at night, I was coming home and grieving in private. I can only imagine what the others were thinking and feeling. Thankfully, some of my brothers are not fans of the rules and stopped by to check on me. 1 year later, on the anniversary of Sam's death, we all got together and built a memorial cross and placed it on Sam's property where he had planned to build his future barn-dominium. To this day, it still sits there in the field. The neighbors often say they see people stop their cars by the side of the road for a few moments to remember him. Sam was many things to many people, and his life was filled with laughter and duty to his friends and family. It just shows you that even when a man like Sam leaves this earth, he still manages to bring together so many people, united by a common bond of friendship and love. That day, the lodge did not lose a member. We lost a piece of ourselves that we can never get back. As we learn to move on and pick up the pieces of our lives, we know that his spirit, his memory, and what he stood for remains with us and can never be taken away. Mayhaps his story will be a lesson to all those in Masonry, that those bonds that hold us are not mere words, but true tethers to the heart that unite all of us in brotherhood. We miss you, Sam. I miss you every day, and you will never be forgotten. Remember, craftsmen, keep your working tools in order and always be on the level.